The Order 1886 tells a story about defeat, about the downfall of Sir Galahad, once a knight of the Queen's Order, but now a knight no more. It wasn't until I saw a tweet from developer Ready at Dawn pointing out that last week marked the 3rd anniversary of the game that I realized it had been this long since playing it for the first time. I know what many of you will be thinking, what an odd game to discuss, not only because so much time has passed, but also because you really don't hear many people discuss it anymore. Completely unaware of it, Ready at Dawn wouldn't just create a story about someone's downfall, but experience it firsthand with this game. The Order was introduced as one of the first PlayStation 4 exclusives, meant to blow gamers away, but would eventually see lots of controversy surrounding the game's length, followed by lukewarm reviews that criticized it in many regards. In all honesty, it was hard to call this very unfair, but it wasn't until the aftermath that I realized what this could ultimately mean. Because that's the thing, while The Order was in no way a flawless game, there was clear potential for what another installment could be bringing next. If it actually will, that's a very big uncertainty right now. 3 years later, that's still what I find myself getting so frustrated by, because it's one of the clearest examples of a problem that's already caused too many great franchises to die an early death. The Order 1886 deserves a sequel, but as it looks right now, Galahad will remain a knight no more. The Order 1886 was announced on Sony's stage at E3 2013 in a press conference that would go down in history as one of the most memorable ones we've seen. With a few of the exclusive games already getting revealed at PS4's introduction event, The Order was the one and only game added to this list that day, and because of it, saw many people discussing the new trailer. Ready at Dawn had always been a highly talented developer. The studio created several PSP titles for top-tier franchises like Jak and Daxter and God of War, received with great review scores across the board. Given this, many people initially had high hopes for The Order, which they confirmed officially started development in 2010 already. It would aim to deliver a blend between satisfying shooter gameplay and an engaging story, while all taking place in Victorian London 1886. The game that inspired the team to start this project was Uncharted 2 Among Thieves, and you might know why that sounded like music to my ears. The Order's creative director called Uncharted 2 a groundbreaking experience that truly set a new bar for what a video game could be, and this is what drove the team to settle on a similar type of game it wanted to create. It's safe to say I understood their decision. All in all, the first details we heard were very promising. The trailers and gameplay demos that would be shown off in the time up to launch managed to keep gamers interested, and with the PS4's game library still being quite empty in its first year, gamers were longing for every new AAA game they could get. The Order 1886 was building up to be a big release. But that is when all of a sudden everything changed. 1 week before launch, Twitter, Reddit, YouTube, every place you looked was filled with anger. The reason for all this was a leaked playthrough that had appeared online, showing someone beating the game in a total time of just 5.5 hours. Sony and Ready at Dawn tried to repair the damage the best they could by ensuring gamers that this wasn't representative of the average playthrough, but the damage had already been done. Suddenly, the conversation about the game had shifted to something else entirely. Now, obviously all this talk didn't exactly escape me either, but contrary to most people online, I've always found the discussion about a game's length to be overblown to say the least. Look, I get it, every gamer wants to get their money's worth when buying a video game. Some people would say that any game sold for $60 at such a length just isn't enough, and some people wouldn't. That's the thing about value, everyone has their own perception towards it. Strangely enough, I found that the conversation seemed to be dominated by people arguing they don't have the budget to buy a new game every month or two. Now, I fully understand that being limited to only a few games per year, obviously you're gonna look for those that can be played the longest. But I did ask myself the question, why were these people looking forward to the game in the first place? If length is that important to you, would the extra few hours really have made a huge difference? The Order was never marketed as a long game, filled with things to do, but one that clearly promised to focus on telling a great story and delivering on that blockbuster promise with lots of polish, all in all just trying to create a unique experience. Now, obviously you could argue if it delivered on that or not, and we'll get to that in a bit, but my point is that at that moment in time, we didn't know yet. What I found so sad about the situation is that even if the game turned out to be incredible, it somehow wouldn't have mattered anymore at that point. And that's where we get into the real problem for me. Somehow we've shifted away from looking at how good a game is to how long we can play it. That's something I would never do. At the end of the day, I want only one thing out of my video games: quality. I enjoy games of all kinds, whether it's an open world game like Horizon, a first-person shooter like Call of Duty, or a cinematic game with little to no gameplay like Heavy Rain. They all focus on doing something else, and they all do those things very well. Some take 10 hours to complete and some take 100 hours, but can anyone please explain to me why, just because you can do the exact same repetitive side mission for the 50th time in an Assassin's Creed game, that extra time to play somehow justifies the money more than a short game that just wants to focus on surprising you from beginning to end? To this day, I've never understood the argument, and I doubt I ever will. It's not like I pick the longest movie when I go to the cinema, I watch the best one. I don't complain that I get less food from a fancy restaurant over McDonald's for the same price. There is a reason why that's the case. But sadly, as far as games go, the last 10 years have seen the rise of open world and multiplayer genres, which caused this general mindset to shift, and I wonder what needs to happen for this to ever be reverted. On February 20th, 2015, The Order 1886 would eventually release. The moment of truth had finally arrived, and I managed to beat the game in a time of 7 hours, spending a total time of 15 hours to achieve my platinum trophy. That was completely fine with me, but while the time to beat is something I might find pretty much irrelevant, that doesn't mean The Order was flawless. Far from it. The biggest thing to me was that variety was just lacking. The core of the game was built up by story moments, walking sequences, and shootouts. In itself, that's okay. Most games don't really focus on lots of different mechanics, but the problem was that it felt very formulaic in its setup. For example, even the greatest games usually don't include much interaction with the environment. The Order, however, made its own world feel static by constantly reminding you that the only way to interact was to pick up objects and turn them around, something that's plain boring and nobody wants to do more than twice. Most shocking to me was the lack of a hand-to-hand combat system, instead replacing it by having you tap triangle to automatically defeat an enemy while risking to get shot. Even the special slow motion ability, despite being unoriginal, could have been great fun, but by automatically aiming at enemies, you as the player just had no control whatsoever. Using the electricity tools or lockpicking abilities would switch things up occasionally, but I would have liked to see an even bigger range of gadgets. Now on to another thing. The Order did something quite revolutionary in that Ready at Dawn decided that the game wouldn't go for the typical 16:9 aspect ratio, but choose the widescreen cinema standard for actual movies. This was apparently done to create an even more cinematic feel. Now, that might sound great on paper, but the consequence was that it blocked off such a significant portion of the screen that it was sometimes hard to really see what was going on around you. Especially when in cover behind an object, it seemed almost impossible to get a full sense of the locations of all enemies, unless you'd pop out and risk getting shot at. In combination with the fact that the camera was very close up to the main character, all in all it made the game feel more clunky than it needed to be. Whether the Black Boss actually benefited the cinematic feel of the game is something I still don't see, and I think it would have done just fine without. Now, as far as the value goes, something that could have easily fixed the controversy that the game received would have been a multiplayer mode. Sadly, this was completely lacking, even though it clearly fitted the type of game. With its overall satisfying combat and third-person cover mechanics, an Order multiplayer could have basically provided great competition for a game like Gears of War. And with the PlayStation platform lacking its own staple multiplayer franchise, this is a massive void that Ready at Dawn could have easily filled. They would have been much better off with a Sony that felt it truly needed them. Last but not least, the game was full of QuickTime events. I don't usually have a big problem with the inclusion of these, but it's at the point where they start making up for the lack of basic gameplay features that you realize the amount of them is just too much. Again, there is no denying these flaws were present. Did they bring the quality of the game down? Most definitely, but none of it actually made the game unbearable, nor were they flaws that could never be fixed in a future game. The Order 1886 showed some very clear symptoms that we've seen many first entries in a series suffer from. They were growing pains, the typical mistakes a developer makes who just started a new project, spent many years to build an engine, has great ideas but doesn't quite know how it will all come together yet. That's a shame to see, but should that really mean it's game over? Now that all the bad stuff is out of the way, let's focus on the opposite. There were some genuinely great things about The Order. In preparation of making this video, I played through the game one more time, and I couldn't help but notice I was once again having a blast. As a linear third-person action-adventure game, it was visually made clear how this game took its inspiration from many of my favorite games. The way it tells its story is impressively done, with convincing voice acting and motion capture making you truly forget these are digital characters. It even set a new bar in how cutscenes would blend into the action, with animations all in real time and natural transitions that at that point even a company like Naughty Dog hadn't managed to do yet. I found the story itself to be engaging. Its plot surrounding the Order of King Arthur's Knights, protecting civilians against the Half-Breed while fighting the anti-government rebels, was a setup I found very cool and hadn't seen before. The game was cleverly set up in 3 acts that all led up to an event that drastically changed the direction of the story. And the characters were great too. Sir Galahad, Lafayette, Lady Igraine. They made for a great trio that, only because their screen time was limited due to the length of the game, deserved to be fleshed out more than they did, so I could actually grow attached to them. They had that in the making. And the world itself was beautiful to look at. Obviously, from a visual standpoint, there was little to complain. I think there were some great tricks applied as far as motion blur and lighting goes that made the game truly appear to be ahead of its time. For a 2015 game, the graphics are still impressive, and if one decision did pay off, it's Ready at Dawn's decision to build their own engine from the ground up. But even in its design, Victorian London was intriguing to say the least. The buildings, zeppelins, weaponry, werewolves and vampires, everything together formed an atmosphere that was unique and certainly interesting. Last but not least, the shooting itself felt great. Whether it was a pistol, rifle or shotgun, you clearly felt the impact when hitting a target. Once you finally got access to some of the even more special weapons and watched the fire from the thermite rifle spark across the screen, or use the arc induction lance to shock enemies with electricity, it was hard to not feel a great sense of satisfaction. And ultimately, that's the thing. The execution might not have been perfect, but a solid base was clearly there. With its great world, characters, combat, graphics and of course the cliffhanger ending, it all begged for a sequel to be made. I think it absolutely deserves that. I've always compared The Order to Uncharted Drake's Fortune, not only because I see some clear resemblances, but because I could also see a next installment go in the exact same direction. Drake's Fortune was too short, didn't have a multiplayer, and made some mistakes it didn't have to make. It faced very similar criticisms, but the next entry blew everyone away. Why? Because Naughty Dog had the time to analyze what went wrong, and now able to purely focus on the new game itself, instead of laying the groundwork, they came much better out of it. So how then would a sequel to The Order improve? First of all, yes, it would be longer. Despite everything I've said in this video, it's clear that it's what gamers want, and that's what Ready at Dawn will deliver. Again, as the engine is already there and the team now has experience with making the game, it'll be much easier to focus on creating more content within the same time frame. Next, I think we'll see a bigger focus on different types of gameplay, like environmental puzzles and platforming sections. Mind you, the first game already had those, but these occasions were incredibly rare. Shootouts may be improved with an even bigger selection of guns and finally creating a true hand-to-hand combat system that will make things feel so much less static. We didn't see many standout set pieces in the first game, so the second one might be able to add some real spectacle and blow you away with moments you can't believe you're playing. Adding all this while cutting the fat, like removing the black borders, no more pick up and look at object moments, and finally shift from quicktime events to player control at every moment possible, and you've got yourself a game that's hard to complain about anymore. Obviously, with the sequel, we'll be able to truly get to see this world being expanded upon. The existing characters will be more fleshed out, and new and even better characters might be introduced. There will be even more variety in locations, and the story will be much more engaging, so I already look forward to seeing what will happen that will hopefully mend the bond between Galahad and his former companions. Last but not least, if the team truly wants to go above and beyond what's necessary, we need to see a multiplayer mode. Offer various game types, make us create our own classes, spawn the more special rifles as power weapons across the map for people to fight over, and create some interesting mechanics with the world's lore, like using Blackwater to heal yourself or fellow teammates. With the team having just recently experimented with online network components in their Deformers game, I highly expect they'd plan on adding it. As you will hopefully agree, a sequel to The Order has the potential to be great, to take everything to the next level, and I can only hope that Sony has granted Ready at Dawn this possibility.
Is there a future for the Order franchise?
The best way to answer that, well, without giving anything, how can I say this? Is there a future? Yes, that IP has a future. It definitely is built into the IP. That future is something that was built from the very get-go, from the first day we started working on it. It wasn't built, as you know, since you played the game, and for the ones who played out there, yeah. There is a larger storyline. There's a macro story that keeps going. There's an IP that is actually bigger than even the storylines that we created. So there are legs to this IP, definitely.
And Sony sees it as like, that was a hell of an investment. We're gonna keep pushing this baby.
Well, you have to ask Sony then.
Okay, interesting.
In the end, that's the one and only question that matters. Is there a future for the franchise that is The Order? To me, what Ready at Dawn said in the interview just now all sounded very positive, but a year and a half later, apart from still talking about the game on their Twitter channel, there isn't much more to go by. Interestingly enough, on their website, Ready at Dawn states they are currently working on 3 games. Their expansion of their VR project Lone Echo, support for Deformers, a small title that recently came out, and last but not least, a new AAA third-person action console title, based on a brand new original IP. When I read this for the first time, it sounded like a completely new project. However, at second sight, the wording of it does seem to be very specific. Not only do all the description tags, AAA, third person, action and console, match the franchise, saying it's based on a new IP is an interesting choice of words. If there's one thing I've noticed in recent years, it's that despite all the bad publicity, many gamers actually do want to see a sequel. The media might not have treated it too well, but gamers saw this franchise had everything it needed to become great. You would think that Ready at Dawn wouldn't keep these people in anticipation if there wasn't any good news to share around, but their hesitance to actually just confirm they're working on a new IP and the cryptic wording on their website is surely making it hard to predict for me. And that brings us back to 2018, 3 years after the game released. I hope you'll agree that while I'm clearly enthusiastic about this game, I tried my best to look at both sides of the spectrum. The Order 1886 was not an amazing game, I'd not even call it great, but to say it doesn't deserve a second chance is something you'll never hear from me. I can already see what the reaction would be. A huge gameplay demo at E3 to announce the sequel that instantly makes us forget about the mistakes in the first game. One that will show off amazing environments, a bigger scope, new mechanics, massive shootouts, and some spectacular set-piece moments that will instantly blow us away. Whether Ready at Dawn has been able to convince Sony that lessons were learned and that they can correct their mistakes are what will ultimately decide if we'll see that sequel happen or not. In the end, that is what depressed me the most about the Order 1886. It wasn't its world, nor the flaws that brought the game down. It's the potential of this franchise that is so great, but we may never get to see. That going to waste would be a damn shame. Thanks a lot everyone for watching yet another episode in my in-depth gaming series. Because of your incredible support by liking these videos and sharing them with your friends, the previous episode on the PlayStation 5 managed to achieve over 300,000 views, which is absolutely incredible and I've never seen before. It's a testament to how important your support is, so I can keep making these videos for you all. Therefore, if you enjoyed this episode, then please help me out by doing the same thing. But best of all, please support me on patreon.com/robingaming for just a $1 per month or more if you can miss it. Ultimately, the Patreon supporters make these videos possible to happen, and I would like to thank all of you shown in the credits on screen. With that being said, look forward to a new episode coming up very soon, and then for now, I'd like to thank you a lot for watching and hope to see you again next time.